Howdy folks, I'm Brian, and here's some Reddit. Our first story is titled, Am I a Jerk for Walking Away During My Girlfriend's Proposal Because I Was Embarrassed? We were celebrating my girlfriend's 42nd birthday over Zoom with my parents and her parents the other day. I'm a 39-year-old male, and my girlfriend and I have had an okay relationship for the past 14 years. And 2 years ago, we decided to move in together. But recently, after the births of our 2 kids, a 2-year-old female and a 1-year-old female, it's been hard to stand each other or see her as I used to. She has developed mind-boggling insecurities, including trying to make me quit my job as a club promoter and going as far as getting a second job so I could do so, because she claims that I'm barely getting any work and that she's insecure about all the temptation that I'm around, and it's time that I get a day job rather than an after-hours job. Her birthday party, if we can call it that, just involved us drinking, eating cake, and talking to our parents. However, when I thought we were about to sign off, she exits the room and comes back shortly after. She gets on her knees and says that she loves me and wants to join her life with mine completely. She said that she couldn't wait any longer and decided to take the initiative. She then asked if I would marry her. I just felt very naked and exposed. Frankly, we did talk about proposals and rings, but I thought that was more of a wishful thinking type thing. And while I was more inclined to think about that possibility previously, with everything going on, I thought she knew that I didn't need more. Everybody was staring at me, and I was pretty mad that she put me in a situation where I could be blindsided like that. So I told her that I needed to get some air and told the people on Zoom to have a nice night and thank them for celebrating with us. When I come back inside, my girlfriend is crying, and I'm treated to a 3-hour lecture on how she regrets giving her all to me, as if I haven't done the same. Am I the jerk? I get theoretically that I'm not supposed to be blindsided, but I admit that I was, and she basically asked me to do something that I really didn't want to do. And I felt embarrassed in front of my parents. Here's the thing. You two are, for all intents and purposes, married. I mean, after 14 years, you two should have already had a conversation about whether or not you were going to get married or not. Now, marriage isn't for everyone, and sometimes people don't want to get married. And if both partners have had that discussion and they agree that that's what they want, that they want to just have a relationship that outside of the bounds of the legal definition of marriage, that's perfectly fine. And those relationships are just as valid as any married relationship. So the validity of your relationship here isn't in question at all. I mean, you two are, like I said, for all intents and purposes, married. As for her changing, over a 14-year period of time, let's hope she's changed at least a little. And you say that you have an okay relationship, but I mean, again, you've been together for 14 years. Maybe it's a little bit more than okay. So I think in your previous conversations, you probably got her hopes up that someday you would be willing to have a wedding with her and marry her. If you're leading her on and not telling her straight up that no, you have no intention of marrying her and that this relationship is never going to end, is never going to be a married relationship, then yes, you're a jerk because you've been leading her on for however long. That's really what the trouble is here. You weren't clear in your intentions, and she took it upon herself to make the next move. As for proposing in front of a group of people, that's always kind of a risky thing. Like, some people like that attention, some people don't like that attention. And I think that was probably, I'm hoping it wasn't like a manipulative move on her part, but also she may have just really thought that you were going to say yes and that you were going to be excited about it, especially if you've had conversations about it in the past. And she clearly misjudged this situation. So I guess in some ways we have to understand what her motivations behind, the proposal was. Did she propose to you because she sincerely thought you were going to say yes? Or did she propose to you, on this call because she thought you weren't going to refuse in front of your parents. So I think that's something that we have to examine to know, to judge her, and it's just something I can't answer. But for your part of things, for leading her on for all this time, not having a serious conversation about what your expectations and goals for this relationship were, and then, essentially letting her down hard, I think that makes you a jerk in this situation. Yeah, he makes it clear that he thought her party was lame. If only she knew someone whose job it was to promote an awesome event and get people hyped up and enthusiastic for them, and cared enough about her to leverage those skills and create something that was special for the mother of his kids. But yeah, probably more wishful thinking on her part. No reason to expect any actual action from her partner of over a decade. You're the jerk, OP. Our next letter is titled, Am I the jerk for telling my wife that she's not my child's mother and she needs to back off? I'm a 29-year-old female, and I was dating a guy prior to my marriage with my wife, a 28-year-old female. But he was a complete jerk. When I found out I was pregnant with my new son, now 5, was also when I discovered that my boyfriend was cheating on me. I thought if we aren't dating, at least we could be co-parents. But when I told him about our son, he straight up ghosted me. He changed his phone number, deleted his social media, and moved. Where to? I haven't the slightest, but I've done everything in my power to find him. Ever since my son was born, my best friend has helped me so much. Eventually, she moved in and we started having a relationship. We got married about 3 years ago, and my son has known her his entire life, and he calls me mommy and calls her Mimi. However, it always seemed like I was fighting her over my own son's attention. Ever since he was a baby, he was attached to the hip. That's supposed to be my job, but we just don't have that kind of relationship. I work in a high-stress job while she's worked from home long before that was common. So she had obviously more time with him. But I still think that he's my son, and it hurts to know that he doesn't have that relationship with me. He used to scream when I held him, but would instantly stop when my wife would take him. This morning, I was making my son his favorite breakfast, French toast and eggs, and he said, I like it better when Mimi cooks it. Can she do it? I'll admit I was a bit offended, and I kind of snapped back that I'm your mom, and if I want to make breakfast, I will. He started throwing a fit, but I just didn't want to deal with it. I told him that he could either stay here and eat breakfast or go to his room for the rest of the day. My wife overheard and said I was being harsh. I told her, look, I've just about had it with you too. You're not his mom, so butt out and let me handle my child. She went silent and just locked herself in our bedroom. She is refusing to talk to me and not responding to my texts. I think that she's overreacting. I feel like I was a bit harsh, but I think any mother would be in this situation. Was I the jerk? I do appreciate all the help she's given me, but she needs to give me a chance to parent my own child. Edit. So I stepped away and came back to this huge response. As soon as I open one comment, I get 10 more. I get it. I'm the jerk. I've tried to talk to my wife, but she says she's really hurt by what I said and needs some time to process. I didn't want to hurt her that badly. I love her and I don't want her to leave us. A lot of you all suggested to have her sign adoption papers so that if we ever divorced, she would have custody of our son. And I think I'll surprise her with the idea when we've had some time to cool down. I'm sorry. So this sounds like a really sad and unfortunate situation. And it sounds like she's just very jealous. And I'm glad to hear that she realizes that she was the jerk in this situation. But this is a good time to remind folks that you can't take back what you've said. And this was a really hurtful thing to say. And I think that she didn't realize how damaging it would be. I think that this is the kind of conversation that you approach very delicately and not say things like, this is my child and not your child, the child that you've helped raise for the last 5 years. Look, she's your wife, and she's raised this child with you since birth. And I understand the jealousy. I really do. I think that you want to spend time with your child and you want your child to love you. And I think that that is really admirable. And I think that it probably hurts you to see her have a closer relationship with your wife than you. And I imagine there's a lot of parents like this in the same situation where even, biologically related, like the husband or wife have a closer relationship with the child, and they may feel some pangs of jealousy in that respect. And I think that's probably a good time to enter couples counseling or even family counseling. These are complicated feelings and they're hard to deal with. So, and bottling them up like this, like what you've done, will only cause them to explode out like what's happened here. If anyone is kind of in a similar situation, don't let these things bottle up. Don't let them, overflow and get to the point where they become hurtful things to say to people. I think this should have been, talked about and addressed a long time ago. And, it's really unfortunate that it came out the way it came out. So good luck, OP. I hope that you can mend things, and I hope that you can make things right. You're the jerk. You need to go into therapy for your jealousy. This is your wife's son too, stepson. She helped raise him too. It's not a competition. This is insecurity. Your wife has done nothing wrong. Yeah. Oh, and then that's another thing I wanted to talk about. This is a partnership. Remember, relationships, you're on a team together and not fighting each other. So work together as a team. Don't fight each other at every turn, and you will have a more successful relationship. Our next letter is titled, Am I a jerk for asking for financial help even though I technically, legally have the money? Throwaway account. I am an artist and performer who lives a very bohemian lifestyle. I live in a large, old, broken down home with 4 other artists. We each pay less than half in rent than what we usually would rent for in a major US city. I am one of the most popular drag queens in my city. I host a few regular gigs, and I hustle and do whatever else I need to get by. My goal has always been to support myself entirely from my art. I grew up far away from where I live. I moved here as soon as high school finished. I have been here for 4 years, and I'm very much integrated into my new city, with many friends and fans and local connections. I recently aged out of my parents' insurance, and I could not find a single plan that I could afford. I reluctantly started a GoFundMe and raised a couple $1,000s from friends, fans, and Instagram followers. I'm not confident in my ability to choose the best plan, so I posted to Facebook for suggestions on how to pick a plan. An acquaintance in my city reached out to me and told me that I could probably qualify for Medicaid, or at least for a subsidy through the health insurance marketplace or whatever. I told him several times that I couldn't qualify before he forced me to disclose the reason why. I technically have interest income from my trust fund that I don't touch, but it is enough to disqualify me. He came back at me aggressively, asking if I was saying that I make more than $50,000 per year in just interest, and I told him technically yes, but that is money that I have never asked for and never touched. Somehow, that was enough for him to figure out that my trust has over $1 million in it, and he just couldn't believe it. He accused me of scamming people by asking for money to help with my insurance costs, but I don't think I did. I never asked for that money, the trust money. It came from my family and a different part of my life that I successfully left behind. Actually, I'm afraid of touching the money because then I might end up having to pay taxes on it or something, and there's no way I could afford that. To make a long story short, he posted about it on Facebook, telling people that if they gave me money based on my sob story, his words, of not being able to afford insurance, they should ask for their money back. I can see how I might be the jerk if I had told people I couldn't afford to buy insurance, but I did not do that. I just asked for help for paying, and many kind people offered to help. The acquaintance and some of my other friends are saying that simply by creating a GoFundMe, I was giving the impression that I was broke and had no other options than to ask for help. Now, some people are calling me a trust fund baby and saying that my whole persona is fake. But I feel like my previous life was fake, and that the life I have built and lived for over 7 years is my real life. I'm afraid this is going to snowball and ruin everything I've spent the last 7 years building. So, am I the jerk for not using money I never asked for? So whether or not you asked for the money or not isn't the problem here. The problem is that you have that money, and that no matter what, if you ever decided that someday down the line you wanted to utilize that money, it would be there for you. That isn't something that many of your fans and your fellow artists have. They can't just one day decide that they don't want to be poor anymore. And I think that that is probably where this is so hurtful. If you don't want the money, then give it all away. If you really feel this strongly about your situation, then take that money and then give it all away to charity. And then you can ask for money like this. The trouble is that by starting this GoFundMe and asking for help, people assume that you actually need the help. And right now, you don't need the help. You can afford this. Further, you recently got off of your parents' insurance and you could no longer afford health insurance. Well, a lot of people don't even have that. A lot of people don't even have parents who have insurance. So when they get kicked, they don't have a way of getting insurance because they've never been on it in the first place. And that again is kind of tone deaf in the respect that people don't have the same kind of benefits that you have. And you were benefiting from your previous life through that health insurance. And you benefit from your previous life through your educational background and through all the different advantages that you were able to get when you were raised in that environment. And that's not to say you're a bad person. And that's not to say that this was your choice. Clearly wasn't. And you're trying to live a life that you think is a good life here. But you could also take all that money and do something tremendously good with it. And right now, that money is just sitting around doing nothing. And I think that's a true waste. Not everyone is given the opportunity to have the kind of money to change the world. And it sounds like you have that kind of money. If I were in your position, I would change the world. It may not be the burden that you want, but it is your burden nonetheless. Oh, definitely, you're the jerk. People gave you money that they earned, so you didn't have to spend money that you didn't earn. I'm willing to bet that none of the friends and fans who donated had $1 million trust fund that they're terrified to use for their own health care. You took advantage of people who didn't know that they were paying you for your lack of courage. Pay it back. Then consult an advisor and do something nice for your community. Yeah, I agree. Do something nice for your community. All right. Our last story is titled, Am I the Jerk for Telling My Son to Get Over His Injury? Backstory. In September of this year, I, a 61-year-old male, and my son Paul, a 21-year-old male, had a workplace injury in which he unfortunately lost his foot from ankle down. He has been having difficulty trying to adjust despite it being 3 months and having the support of all his family members. Now back to the story. So we were at a family gathering as a pre-Christmas party where all of our extended family is. Paul comes in using his wheelchair, and he's taking up a lot of space in the house with his wheelchair. I asked him why he's not using his prosthetic foot since we spent a lot of money on it, and he said that he's still learning how to use it. And that's when I told him that it just wasn't acceptable at this point, that he was being a massive burden on all of us. He then started getting defensive and said that I wouldn't know what it was like, and I countered by saying that it could have been a lot worse. He could have lost both legs, and that a foot wasn't much to get worked up about. I mean, he can still walk, he's just making excuses at this point. It's not hard to walk with a prosthetic, says someone who, well, I can't judge at the moment. I don't know if they have a prosthetic or not. I'm assuming they don't. After I said that, he got really upset and my wife had to take him to the car where they talked for a second. My wife then came back really mad and told me that Paul said he hated me. And honestly, I was taken aback. I'm just trying to help him. It's not my fault that he lacks motivation. My family thinks that I'm a jerk, but I think I'm being reasonable since Paul is a massive burden on all of us by not getting over his injury. Am I the jerk? Edit 1. So after reading through the comments, I can see many think that I'm a jerk, but I will provide some basis towards myself. My father served in the Vietnam War with some buddies in 1967. After the war, they all came to our house for a couple of beers. And a lot of them were mangled. One lost both his legs and another the hand. And another was paraplegic. Many more, but that's just to name a few. I got to know some of them, and still see them once in a while to this day. They adjusted fine, using their prosthetics within a month or two, going back to life nearly as normal. My own father suffers from PTSD, so yes, I do know what it's like to live with someone with a disability. Yes, I know I might have been harsh on Paul, and yes, I know I chose poor words. I just want Paul to readjust, and it's almost as if the accident happened yesterday. Edit 2. After reading some more comments, I now know I'm the jerk. I know that it was an awful, horrible thing for me to have said that, and I need help knowing what I should do next. I understand that many of you are upset with me, and that's perfectly fine. I know I've messed up bad, and I need help to make this right. How should I apologize to Paul? So I think there's probably a lot to unpack here. And it sounds like you two were both involved in a workplace injury. And it sounds like he lost his foot and you were fine. And in some ways, it sounds like there might even be a little bit of, survivor's guilt involved here. That you want him to return to normal because you feel bad that something happened to him and not you. And this may be not something that's at the forefront of your mind, but I think that this is something that you should at least consider. You don't sound like you have a prosthetic. In fact, I think if you had, you probably would have mentioned it here. And to judge his difficulty with a prosthetic, and even though you haven't ever used one, I think is very harsh, and I think that it's completely uncalled for. And I think calling him a burden, of course, is, completely uncalled for. And I think that's really where you need to start. I think you need to tell him that you're sorry for saying that he's a burden, and that if you feel guilty for what happened to him, tell him that a part of you feels guilty for this, and a part of you feels upset that life just can't go back to normal. And I think that you really need to kind of examine your own feelings and to understand why you feel so strongly about this. So again, I think starting off with I'm sorry, sitting down with him and talking to him, offering him support, telling him that you're going to be there for him, try to help him in any way you can to adapt to his new life, and, just try to be patient, kind, and understanding. Don't be judgmental on him, and don't try to push him too hard to use his prosthetic. This is a hard time for him, and it's a hard time for a lot of people, given the state of the world. And sometimes extra stress can do a lot of bad things to people. But again, knowing people who have had injuries, I think, is a far cry from experiencing one on your own, and each person is going to experience injury and, maimment different than anyone else. And so again, I think you need to tell him that you're going to be there for him, you're going to lend him support, and you're going to do whatever it takes to help him feel comfortable and help him, resume his life as he wants to. Good luck with that. And to his update, he's gauging how his son should react by some poor vets who are friends of his dad. Do you really think that they were going to show you their real pain, trauma, and grief to their friend's son? Of course they were going to seem fine to you. You didn't live with them for 3 months after they lost their limbs. You never lived with them. They came over to drink some beers. I'm sure their wives and or family members would have seen a completely different side of them. You're being extremely ignorant, foolish, and callous. Yeah, I think that one brings up a lot of really good points here. they went over to your father's house to forget about things and to reminisce. I think that's really well phrased. All right, folks, that's all the time we have for today. I hope you enjoyed these stories. If you did, consider giving me a thumbs up. If you didn't, consider giving me a thumbs down. So in case you missed yesterday's episode, that's Friday, December 18th, I'll put a link up here. In celebration of exceeding 200 subscribers, I'm giving away $25 and to one of these charities. So if you want, watch that video, get details on how to vote for that, and vote before Friday. So yeah, thanks again so much for watching, and I'll see you all tomorrow. That you were planning on someday